Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about some IDP players to fade for the 2024 fantasy football season.
Hike!
All right, Joe, so why don't you kick us off? What do you got as your first IDP fade?
Yeah, I'm probably going to take some flack for this one, but my first player I'm going with is Micah Parsons, and I'm going to fade him this year just because I honestly think he relies on sacks a little bit too much. Last year he had 16 sacks, but he only had 34 solo tackles last year, and I'm concerned because the Cowboys' run defense was very bad, and it just seemed like teams figured out that they could just run at the Cowboys and specifically run at Micah Parsons and almost take him out of the game. And since he doesn't give you that tackle floor and he's kind of sack dependent, like I think he's good in like a best ball league, but if you're playing in season long like IDP, I think he could end up not being as good as you think. And the where he's being drafted is current ADP sitting at 3.5. And there's just guys like, Myles Garrett, Aiden Hutchinson, they're going at between the 5th and 6th pick. I'd honestly rather have one of those guys who provides more of a tackle floor and has some opportunities for sacks.
Yeah, I mean, you've always been kind of critical of how the Cowboys use Micah Parsons, and I think compared to those other guys, Micah Parsons is really the only guy. We saw Sam Williams now, kind of up and coming young player on the defensive line. He tore his ACL or Achilles, I can't remember which one. He's out for the
Achilles.
year. Yeah, I think it was Achilles too, but he's out for the year now. So you're hoping that they've got Marshawn Nealand. Does he kind of, the rookie, does he turn into something? You also have got DeMarcus Lawrence, but he's been there for a long time. I think he's starting to slow down. So what does he really have to work with, that part being Parsons? So I could see how you would find other players more intriguing because you're not necessarily saying he's going to bust, right? You're just saying that you're fading him compared to the other values on the table.
Correct. And then honestly, like I'd be more comfortable taking him if they used him more at middle linebacker and in the inside, like they used to. I mean, that to me is when Micah Parsons is most valuable, when you got him to play on the edge, get the sack numbers, and then also have him, be the middle linebacker, which gave him the tackles necessary for him to really be a top player.
All right, Joe. So my first IDP fade, I may take some flack for this one, but it's going to be Josh Hines Allen. He changed his name during the offseason. He had a heck of a year this past season, really broke out. He had 17 and a half sacks, 66 total tackles. It was a career season for him, which allowed him to get paid the big bucks over in Jacksonville. Prior to that, though, he had 7 sacks, 7.5 sacks, and then, 2.5, basically. It looks like, and around 10.5 his rookie year. So he really took off in this most recent season. Now I recognize he did have 54 hurries. He had a lot of total pressures. It's just such a high number. And do we expect him to repeat that same production? We know sacks can be fluky. I think he had a good pressure rate, but you've got Travon Walker. You now are bringing in a guy like Eric Armstead. So there's a couple pieces in that defensive line. He's probably the biggest name of the bunch. But to me, when you're looking at ADP, Will Anderson's going after him. Danielle Hunter. It's a sandwich, right? It goes Will Anderson, then Josh Allen, then Danielle Hunter. I would much rather have Danielle Hunter. Then you've got Brian Burns and Khalil Mack and Kayvon Thibodeau. I can understand if you want to go Josh Allen instead of Khalil Mack, but I would rather take the upside with Burns or even Kayvon Thibodeau. Because you've got both those guys there. So I'm just fading him. I think there are better options on the board at the end of the day.
Yeah, I could see that. I think it would just be hard to fade him. I mean, I think there's also an opportunity to kind of just keeps building on his success. The Jaguars have a pretty good defensive front, and Travon Walker's only going to get better. So teams aren't just going to be able to, focus on stopping Josh Allen coming off the edge. But you're not wrong where if he doesn't continue to have these high sack numbers, kind of similar to my point on Micah Parsons, he's going to be disappointing because he's not the, biggest tackle guy and going to get you that tackle floor like some of those other guys you mentioned. And, the value of some of those other guys probably not wrong in just taking a swing at one of those.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So, Joe, who is your second IDP fade?
Yeah, my next fade is going to be hot commodity, and I'm going to go with defensive tackle Justin Madubuike. And, similar to, as we keep talking, Josh Allen and Micah Parsons, and just these guys that are just relying on the sacks, and especially at the defensive tackle position, he had 35 solo tackles last year, which I feel like is kind of low for, interior defensive tackle position where they should be stopping the run and stuff, but he gives you that pass rush upside. But I just think where he's being taken, what if he doesn't get as many sacks again this year? I think you're going to end up getting disappointed because it's not normal for defensive tackles to get 14 sacks in a year. That's an awful high number. It's the most he's ever had. He got paid big time by Baltimore. But where he's taking him, if he doesn't get to that number or even get double-digit sacks at the defensive tackle, overall, I think you're going to be disappointed with the cost that you currently have to acquire him at.
Yeah, I think you knocked this one out of the park, Joe. I mean, Madubuike really came on the scene last year because he really wasn't known for his pass rush ability. He was more of a run defender. And then he really just took it up to another level this past season. So I think people are, based on what we're seeing on ADP, people are going to have to spend up quite a bit to get this guy. And do we expect him to have those same numbers? I expect him to regress.
Yeah, I mean, just for an example, he's going ahead of guys like Christian Wilkins, even Jeffrey Simmons, who I like a lot if he's ever able to stay healthy. He's another guy that's got that sack upside. So those are just a couple of examples of, the couple of guys he's getting taken ahead of. And I think, I'd rather go for one of those guys that we've seen, especially Christian Wilkins going over to the Raiders with Max Crosby. I think he's going to be a pretty dominant player. I'd rather take this swing there a couple of picks later than go ahead and draft Madubuike.
Not to mention, what is the help for Madubuike on the outside?
Yeah. I mean, they keep trying these outside rushers from Penn State, and it just hasn't worked out.
No, I mean, Clowney, obviously, it was very good, for a fill-in last year. He's no longer there.
Right.
They had, like you said, they mentioned you got Odafe Oweh. He's never really panned out. They now got Adisa Isaac. I believe he's, I don't think he's been practicing or he's been injured. So it's like, they haven't really had a good guy in there since Matt Judon and Zadarius Smith. Those guys, and it's been a while since they've really had a huge pass rushing presence.
Yeah, I mean, who knows it if they go ahead and bring Matt Judon back or something as he works through whatever he's working through contractually with the New England Patriots, becomes a different story.
Well, we did see that the newsbreaker these days, Ricky, is breaking that there's going to be a big trade happening in the NFL.
I saw that
this week, so maybe Matt Judon to the Ravens is the play there.
Certainly would make a ton of sense for both teams.
So my second IDP fade is going to be a guy you like a lot, Joe, and that's going to be defensive tackle Kobe Turner. He had a phenomenal rookie season. I for one was not expecting it. A former third-round pick out of Wake Forest. But he had 57 total tackles, 9 sacks, and then he also had 31 hurries. So, I mean, he did a pretty good job, but I believe he was a beneficiary of Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald retired. He's no longer there. So, to me, what does that defensive line look like? I mean, they've got a lot of young talent. They got Byron Young. They drafted Jared Verse. So they drafted Braden Fisk to go alongside him. So it's like, can Kobe Turner continue to be that productive player? Based on what I'm seeing here, I would bet otherwise because I really think he benefited from Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is fair. He definitely could have. I almost wonder too, like if you should just take the value on Braden Fisk, another guy that's kind of got that pass rush pedigree, and everyone's going after Kobe Turner, chasing that. But what if Kobe Turner ultimately, is that presence for a guy like Braden Fisk to start getting loose and get his sacks, as a rookie? Because it's going to be tough for Kobe Turner to rely on a couple of rookies himself to get his production back. So I agree here. As much as I do like Kobe Turner, and I liked him coming into last year, I am curious to see how he does without Aaron Donald being there.
I just think at the end of the day, he's defensive tackle 16 according to ADP. It's not awful. It's not like, the value is that much. But honestly, I'd rather have a guy like Kalijah Cansey, even a guy like Zach Allen out of Denver who's later. Give me those guys. I think they actually have a possible bigger ceiling than Kobe Turner because I think he just spent it. I'm with you. I'd rather have Fisk. Take the flyer on Fisk instead of spending up for Kobe Turner.
Yeah, I like your call about Zach Allen. Everything out of Denver, he's been lighting up training camp. He's been playing really well. Another year in Vance Joseph's system. And honestly, the Broncos have beefed up the defensive line, which could help free him up.
All right, Joe. So who's your last IDP fade?
Yeah, my last IDP fade that I'm going to talk about is Dax Hill, formerly a safety. He's converting over to the cornerback position. And that's honestly the biggest reason I am fading him. As a safety, he was productive, 79 tackles, a couple of interceptions, but right now he's not even guaranteed to start. Currently, DJ Turner's ahead of him. I find it interesting that he's going to go from safety to playing outside corner. Thought he would maybe make an easier transition over to the nickel position, but even then they got Mike Hilton there. So I'm not really sure, what their plan is, but right now he's going to have to rely on an injury to get playing time.
Yeah, what the Bengals are doing right now to me is very perplexing. I'm not really understanding what's going on. I mean, from a stat standpoint, and maybe Pro Football Focus would say otherwise, because they're one of the ones that people look at as a measurement. But to my knowledge, he did pretty well as a safety last year. So you're talking about now you're taking him out of that role. You're putting him into the corner spot, and he's not even a starting corner. Why take a former first-round pick that was productive? Why bury him underneath the depth chart if he's not playing? It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, and the thing of it is they bring back Von Bell, and
he's old, man. I mean, he's like 33, 34.
He's old, and then they even have Jordan Battle, but I think they're disappointed with Battle, and I think that's part of the reason they brought Von Bell back in the first place, maybe to groom him along. So it's like, as I know, at least in our fantasy league for IDP points, Dax Hill was a high scorer at the safety position. So I'm as perplexed as you. Just if people are seeing the name and remembering that production at safety, we're just saying, hey, be careful because he's now playing a different position, and his playing time's not even guaranteed right now.
Yeah, I don't understand the move to. I mean, you would know best. I mean, he was a former Michigan Wolverine. Mm-hmm. He kind of came into the NFL as sort of a tweener, right? I mean, people didn't really know what he would be.
Right, and that's why I thought having him be like an inside nickel type player, similar to like a Mike Hilton, honestly, who just happens to be on the Bengals right now, would make more sense. But right now, if you look at the depth chart, they've got him as an outside corner, second string behind DJ Turner, who also happens to be from Michigan. But I would have thought, for a safety, it would have made more sense to have him, at the nickelback position.
Yeah, I just was curious what PFF had. I mean, they had him as a grade of 50.9, which is in the orange, not great. Really good in run defense, green in run defense, green in tackling, green in pass rush, but they gave him a 43 in coverage. So I guess from a PFF standpoint, they feel that he got burned a lot, I guess.
But he's not going to get burned as a corner. That's I don't know.
So I'm also going to be talking about the secondary as my final IDP fade, and that's going to be safety Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates has played in the NFL for 6 years, former Cincinnati Bengal, actually. He signed with the Atlanta Falcons this past season, got mega money, and I was kind of curious how he would do, and he did very, very well. He had a career year, had 132 total tackles. He had 11 pass deflections, 6 interceptions, which is a career high. So Jesse Bates did really, really well in Atlanta. But you got to remember, this is a new defense now. Raheem Morris is now the head coach, so now it's his defensive scheme, no longer the former defensive coordinator. So I just question, I'm always leery, I should say, of going and spending up on a guy who just had a career year, and then there's changes in scenery around him. Why spend up for a guy like that? You're basically paying premium dollar to get the guy, and I don't really know what the return is.
Yeah, I think especially at the safety position where there's just a ton of guys that, get a lot of tackles at the position. It really is tough for those guys to kind of separate from the bunch just because, especially when you're getting a good amount of points for tackles and safeties, tend to get a lot of them. What separates him is just, his interceptions and the pass deflections he's able to get. But to your point, what happens if he's not getting those interceptions? Then his price just isn't worth it. You're better off just kind of going elsewhere at that point.
Well, he's safety 4 right now. I mean, I think
Right.
that's pretty high. I mean, you could get a guy like Jaquan Brisker, who's an up and coming guy. Xavier McKinney now with the Packers. Minka Fitzpatrick had a rough year, but he's coming back healthy. So, I mean, you got even Kyle Duggar. He's a safe play. Jesse Bates, although he had a great year, he kind of had one good year in the 2020 season. But other than that, he's been kind of mediocre until last year when he really took off. So I think he'd be worth fading in my mind.
Yeah, you always got to be leery of buying, like you said, buying the players off of the big year that, especially a big career year, just because if you're going to rely on that to happen again, it's really hard to repeat that and tends to not happen. And most of the time, you're just going to be disappointed where you have to reach for those type of guys coming off of such a great year.
So that does it for IDP players to fade for the 2024 fantasy football season. Coming up in our next episode, we're going to be talking about how you should save some money because there are some bounce back players that you should be targeting, and you're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.